Now, our first topic for discussion, the nationwide strike embarked upon by judiciary workers since Tuesday is continuing indefinitely despite the meeting of the leaders with those of the Nigerian Bar Association. And as we're speaking, today is day 6 of that strike. Now, the bone of contention is financial autonomy for the judicial arm of government. Now, let me start with you, Barrister Ononiwu. Autonomy, financial autonomy. I mean, this should not be an issue. Now, should it?
I'm surprised. I am surprised it's an issue. I don't know what is difficult in obeying the Constitution as well as court judgments in this our country. I find that the executive find it very difficult to obey court orders. And that's the bane of the problems we have in Nigeria. What is the autonomy? What are we even talking about? We're saying the judiciary, the finances of the judiciary must be from first charge. It shouldn't be determined by the state government or the state governor or the president. It means that once the money has hit the federation account, it goes straight to the heads of judiciary, the head of legislature, you know.
The different arms of government.
Why is the judiciary's own a problem? How come the monies for the legislature is not a problem? Why is the judiciary a problem? Why do the government, the court's head have to go cap in hand begging for money? It means that someone wants to continue remoting the judiciary. Because, I mean, when the judiciary have no money, how do they work? It means somebody will be playing the piper and detecting the tune. It's very sad. And unfortunately, this strike has a serious effect on a lot of people. The lawyers who go to courts where they earn a living, those people around the courts who earn a living from court activities, they are going to suffer. Why should we be at this stage at this time? I think we are going 30 years back.
And the people that will suffer most are the ones that are seeking justice.
Litigants.
Those in prisons, those that are awaiting trial.
Litigants. Litigants are suffering. Because, let me tell you something. Anytime the court goes on strike, it means all the cases that should have been heard within that time will start looking for dates far away. And the more you delay, the more money you spend. The more things go wrong.
And justice delayed is never a good thing.
It can never be. It's terrible.
Okay, terrible. Before I come to you, sir, let's go to our virtual guest. We'll be talking to us from Yaba, Barrister Kingsley Chime. Thank you for joining us on the conversation. Now, let's have your view now on this judicial strike.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solomon, for having me. And good afternoon, guests and Nigerians watching all over the world. I think the issue of judicial strike and the consequences on this institution, the judicial institution, and Nigeria as a whole can only be imagined. You know, what the judiciary staff workers are asking is what the Constitution has guaranteed. They are not asking for anything outside what the provisions of the Constitution has stipulated. The judiciary is an arm of government, must be seen to be independent in the real sense of it. And you cannot begin to talk about the independence of judiciary when you don't have physical or financial autonomy. Like the lawyer on the guest, Mr. Ononuju, rightly said, if the judiciary has to go to the executive to demand for what is rightly theirs before they can operate, that, in my view, cannot be said to be an independent organ of government. So this industrial action is only trying to emphasize the need for the executive arm of government to respect the provisions of the Constitution. It's either we are operating a democratically elected government, it's either we are in democracy or we are not. we cannot continue to be pretentious about these things. So what they are asking for, it is not out of place. And I think it is well-founded because, like I rightly mentioned, justice must not only be done, but must be seen to have been done. So if the judiciary has to go cap in hand or be subservient to the executive before they can function, that will indirectly undermine the independence of the judiciary. So I think the industrial action is a good way to go.
So we will come back to you now. Let's get to you, Barrister Ozana, on your take on it.
Yeah, my take on this is very, very simple, and it's very, very unfortunate too. What is happening in this country, particularly with regards to the strike by Houston, is the product of lawlessness. We say we operate in a democratic system of government, but in this part of the world, we don't obey the laws. If we obey the laws, this strike would have been unnecessary. It is a constitutional provision, like my two learned friends have said. Apart from that, I remember the president, Mr. President, issued the executive order 10, further ordering, authorizing that this provision of the Constitution should be complied with. And this very Houston, they went to court. There is an existing court order asking that the Constitution be obeyed. I don't know the difficulty in obeying the court order, the provisions of the Constitution, and Mr. President's executive order 10. So it just boils down to lawlessness. Government will enter into an agreement with parties, with people, with ASU, with this and
different
that.
Associations.
Yeah, associations. They fail to comply with their own part of the contract. And we are supposed to be a democratic government. It's rather unfortunate and surprising. So that's my own take on it. We run a lawless government in this country.
In addition to what my learned colleague has said, it beats me that subsequent government, new governors enter and still do not do the same thing. So you begin to wonder.
You begin to wonder.
I don't know if so. Let me use Sanwo-Olu as a governor of Lagos State. He wasn't there last year or last 2 years.
2 years.
What other governor was there? Is it that this new governor cannot simply obey the Constitution?
It's like one government just passed the baton to the other government without any change.
It's worrisome.
Now, it also begs the question now, who is in charge of making this thing happen for the judiciary? Is it the president, or is it, because from what I'm hearing is the arm of the executive, and of course the president is the leader of the arm of the executive. So, and if the president has made an order, then who is supposed to carry out? Who is supposed to assist the judiciary carry out this function?
It's not as easy as you look at it.
Okay.
The president is the president of the nation. But don't forget they are federating arms.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
The governors. They are also chief executives of their own. The president cannot order them as it were. It means that everybody should, the Constitution is clear.
Very, very clear.
But again, I would want to tilt towards the position of who distributes the funds. If the funds come from federal to the states, why can't the federal government send the monies of the judiciary straight to the judiciary if there has to be something like that? Instead of sending all the monies to the government of the governor, who now decides to do it. Means that the federal government and the state government are in unison in their acts, because there is a first line charge for the judiciary. Why are you sending it to the governor, who eventually decides when he will send the money or how he sends it?
Or even how much he sends.
Or how much he sends. I do not understand that. So I think something has to be done. Everybody needs to sit up and look into that Constitution. But I don't think it's a difficult situation. I don't think so. But these things have, in this country, everything is looked at politically. And that's where our problem begins. Everybody wants to look at how he can manipulate a system to favor him or her. Why should the judiciary be in the mix of this matter? Now, you go back to the judiciary and look for orders and judgments. Meanwhile, you are holding them to the jugular.
Now, and it's not just financial autonomy we're talking about. We're talking about autonomy generally for the judiciary. Now, we talked about this some time ago here when we were taking a look at what's happening in Gombe State, where there was a vacant seat, chief judge of that state for a while, because the governors have to be the one, unofficially as it were, appoint who the chief judge of the state is. And the same thing happens to the federal judge and all that. And the question is, if the executive arm will be elected into office, and the legislatures, the House of Reps and all that, and the National Assembly will have to be elected into office, why not the judiciary? The leader of the judiciary, yes. I'm coming to you, Pastor Uzana. So these whole the judiciary, like let's say the chief judge of the state, for example, have to be subjected to the trials of the legislatures. The list will be forwarded first of all by the executive to the legislatures. Then the legislatures will now be the one to approve the person. Why not elect him like the executive? I think that's where the problem starts from.
In my humble opinion, I don't think that is the problem. The problem, in my view,
sorry to quote you, sir, because the executive, talking about the president and the governors, who would like to bring in someone they like into the office when they are not elected.
It doesn't work like that.
The problem is this. The constitution we are presently operating with, that 1999 constitution as amended, is a very faulty constitution. Very faulty in the sense that we are not operating it in the way and manner a federation should be operated upon. You see, we have at the center the NJC, the National Judicial Council, which should have been for the federation. That is for the federal courts, like the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and Federal High Court.
What about the magistrate court?
Magistrate court is an inferior court, it's not in the Constitution.
Okay.
So, if we are running a proper federation, everything about the state high court should have ended at the state level, with the governor and the state house of assembly handling the matter. But we're in a situation where you have a very faulty constitution, you have some matters being treated at the federal level, matters that are concerning the state judiciary. You have it being looked at from the NJC, from the angle of the NJC, whether it shouldn't have been so. If we're operating a proper federation, every state should handle its own judiciary, both in appointments, in payments, in everything, in totality. But because of the faulty nature of it, you find that in this situation, the governor has his own person, or the person he wants to appoint, but at the federal level, the NJC
have their own.
They have their own idea about who to appoint. Then you have confusion all over the place, because the constitution is not good. It's not perfect. It's not a good constitution. It's not a proper constitution that under which a federation should be operated. Yes, that's my own problem.
Well, I see it from a different light. Okay, because our profession deals mainly with seniority. Seniority, the man that is the most senior in the judiciary takes the helms of affairs if he has not gotten to
exceeded to his expiring.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if that be the case,
I wanted to say retirement. I say expiring.
Well, I mean the age provided as a civil servant. So if it gets to that point, there shouldn't be any impediment for the man that is the most senior to get to that position. But now, I believe, now in agreeing to him again, there seems to be a lacuna which gives the governors some bit of power because he has to, everybody, I mean, he's number one. So everybody is his staff, quote and unquote. Although it's not true, because they always say that executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are equal. But if you look at it again, they're not. Because the executive, like you saw the other time, the DSS went up and arrested the judges. Where is it done? I mean, that shows that the executive and the judiciary are not equal. I don't know what so the problem is obedience to the Constitution. That's just the problem. Everybody just thinks that they can muscle their way up and against the Constitution to do what they want to do. And that's my opinion. But if they follow the issue of seniority, that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, the next man retires, the next in line just enters the shoes. It shouldn't be an issue. But now every time it is an issue. So the autonomy, because the chief executive is number one and he holds the red biro or the green biro or whatever biro, he tends to be able to do anything he wants to do.
So let's go to our virtual guest now. Let me have your opinion on that.
Who actually blame the faulty nature of the Constitution as being behind the challenges of the judiciary? Yes, while I agree that the Constitution is not perfect, but even in its imperfect nature, we have not been able to abide by the provisions therein. So I do not subscribe to the state high court judges being managed by state government, because it is going to be compromised. Judiciary has to be independent in the real sense of it. So that is why we have the National Judicial Council that is has the responsibility of appointment of judicial staff, judicial judges. You know, so you cannot push it to the state governors to handle. Even as it is at the moment, there are a lot of political undertone. So the appointment of judges. Yes, I understand that in most states, the governor would most likely
we're talking about reducing the power of the presidency. Now, if the state government are not handling the judiciary in their state, which means the federal will be, and which means you're making the president even much more powerful than it is. Do you think so?
No, it's not actually the sole power of the president to appoint. The NJC recommends. So it is not a one man being the appointing officer. That is why it is structured in such a way to ensure checks and balances, you know, to ensure that the president does not impose his own candidate, and the NJC will have to scrutinize any candidate that must be appointed. So if you push it to the states, invariably, you have to create the state's counterpart of the NJC, maybe State Judicial Commission or whatever, you know, and that will likely be influenced by state governors. So I don't think the problem is in the appointment of judges or who appoints who. It's actually on how independent the judiciary is. If we are truly independent, everybody would align. But where you have someone, you know, determining who gets what, even apart from the appointment, the chief judge of every state or federal high court must go to the governors or the president to solicit for funds. It cannot work. There is going to be a likelihood of bias, because even in these state high courts, they have matters. There's cases against state governors. So if you do it in such a way, how do you think that a judge will give judgment against a state? That is my position.
Okay. Now, where do the lawmakers come into play here? Because so far, the powers of the executive are defined. They have the autonomy. The legislatures, well, even though there have been allegations that this current National Assembly, they are rubber stamped, but constitutionally and to a large extent, they know how to exercise their powers autonomously. But the judiciary don't seem to have that. So where do the lawmakers come into play here to make sure the executives respect the standard of the judiciary?
I think the lawmaking body, that's the legislature, can remedy this situation by amending the constitution. The governors who try to disobey the NJC argue that it is wrong for the NJC, which is a federal agency, to appoint judges or appoint the chief judge of a state from the federal. Whereas, when you talk about federating units having certain powers, they feel that they, the states, being a federating unit of the federation, should have the power to deal with their judiciary. But as we have it now, the NJC at the federal appoints the chief judge of a state, and the governor will say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. So the only way to remedy this situation is for us to have a constitutional amendment whereby the NJC, the National Judicial Council, should limit its functions to federal courts. Then the states should have their own body to appoint judges.
Now the NJC,
yes.
Don't they have state chapters?
No.
They don't.
The issue is this.
Okay.
They don't.
The NJC, the composition of NJC has to do also with the state chief judges.
Okay.
Members of the Nigerian Bar Association. Probably they all come together. So it's not just federal, it has some state inputs in them.
Okay.
So they meet to determine all these disciplinary actions and what have you. So it is not just the federal. The composition of the NJC covers widely the range of the country. Now, but corruption has eaten deep into Nigeria in such a way that everybody that seems to sit on a government position has some skeletons in their cupboard. And so the government can actually just easily find where you have sleazed some money and hold a choke against you to do their biddings. And that's why there's always a problem. If those people up there are impeccable in their character and integrity, you will find out that they will never be members of NJC, because it appears that most of these judges, the federal government know what they do. Probably some of them know how they behave. So in that sense, you find out that for them to take decisions, a lot of times they are afraid. Because if they take decisions against the government comes after them in another way. So they have things that they have against them. So that's always the problem. But if they follow a stricto sensu, the NJC is comprised with certain individuals. Like I said, judges from the states. The Nigerian Bar Association also has representation in the NJC. Body of benchers, there are a lot of organs that are members of the NJC where they take decisions. Now, unfortunately, because of that autonomy we are talking about, financial, because when there is no money, when you cannot control money, forget all what you are saying. I mean, imagine if a judge's car is not working or cannot move, or he has no car and he needs a car to move, it still comes from the federal government or the state government. How does he operate? It's money, so he can't go to work. Or maybe some allowances that needs to be paid to them is determined by the state governor or the federal. So when we talk about autonomy, financial autonomy is the main autonomy we're talking about. So
where do the lawmakers come in to play here?
The law is there. They have made the law. There must be financial autonomy to the judiciary. So what else do you want the lawmakers?
So we're talking about checks and balances here.
Yes.
When the executives are not obeying the law, aren't the lawmakers supposed to come in?
The lawmakers cannot do more than shout. Now, who executes? That's the problem. The executive executes. Now, a lot of things have happened that the executive arm of government have fallen short of. Who punishes them? Nobody. Even if the judges give judgments against them, who executes the judgment? The executive. I mean, if you have a problem with the police, and you get a judgment against the police, the law states that you have to probably write the Attorney General that want to levy execution or enforce judgment? What if the Attorney General keeps quiet? What happens? You know, these are things that you need to look at to also see that we're just living. It's an aberration. I must tell you.
Okay, let's go to Barrister Chime. Now, let me have your take on that. Where the lawmakers, do they have any kind of say in this decision?
No, the two speakers on the studio have summarized it. The lawmakers' constitutional role is to make laws for the good governance of the country. They have done their part. They cannot implement to execute those laws. So it is within the ambit of the executive arm to ensure the implementation of those laws being made by the legislators. They have done their part, not on the legislators. It is about the executive allowing the judiciary to be independent as envisaged by the Constitution. So the executive has muzzled other arms of government, and the judiciary seems to be, subservient to the executive. I'm sorry to say this. So we cannot bring in the legislators into this because they have done their own part. That is my position.
Okay, well, let's hope these issues were resolved quickly, because I pity for the ones that are seeking justice for different issues.
Terrible. It's terrible.